Welcome to The Writer's Dream. This is a show where authors can talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. You can find us on YouTube. Just look for my name, Linda Maria Frank. I'm the author of the Annie Tillery Mystery Series. Click on my picture and all of my videos will come up. There are over 100 interviews with various authors, most of them local Long Island authors. And if you are a reader or a writer, there's a lot of interesting information there about books. We're also on Facebook. The Facebook page is, guess what? The Writer's Dream. And you can message me on that Facebook page if you're interested in being on the show. Today, we're doing something exciting. Oh, I forgot. We're also on Optimum TV, Channel 20 on Thursday at 2:30. So I didn't want to leave that out. Today, we're doing something really exciting and fun. We're going to talk about the Outlander series. Mary Lambert is my guest. She has been on before. She is an expert in literature and movies, and we're going to talk about why this series is so successful. So welcome, Mary.
Hi, how are you, Linda?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there.
Aren't we all?
What can you say? So what I like to do for our viewers, and I would imagine that many of them have read the series, is I'm going to try to summarize the series. You have to understand these are 9 books in the series, all over 1,000 pages, or just about 1,000 pages. So it's a lot of territory to cover. So we're going to be talking about the themes in the book, the characters, and why the book is so popular, and also it's so popular that it has become a TV series as well, and we'll talk about that. So without further ado, let me tell you about the books. The first book in the series is Outlander, thus Outlander series. And the story is told from the viewpoint of a woman by the name of Claire. Well, she starts out as Claire Randall, but she ends up as Claire Beecham, which is her maiden name, Claire Beecham Randall Fraser. So this is because of what happens in all the stories. But she is the story starts in like 1946, and she was a nurse during the war. On the front lines, saw a lot of action. Her husband works for MI6 or OSS, I'm not sure exactly what, but he was in the spy end of World War II. They reunite after the war because they have not been able to spend a lot of time, and they go on a honeymoon to Scotland. They end up in Scotland on Halloween. And so what happens is her husband is a historian, and he is looking into his past, and he's looking into a particular ancestor by the name of Black Jack Randall. And they end up spending their time with a vicar in the town of Inverness. They also find out about a Wiccan event, because on Halloween, of course, there has to be a Wiccan event. Wiccans are sort of witches. And they go to that, and Claire is very impressed with it. And after the event is over, they go over to this kind of Stonehenge type thing. It's a circle and standing stones. And if you know anything about that, these are ancient monolithic structures, and we're not exactly sure what people use them for, but we think part of it was astronomical events. And she finds a particular wildflower that she becomes interested in because that's her hobby. She's an herbalist. So she's got all this medical knowledge, and she's an herbalist. So she goes back by herself, and she hears the stones humming. And she doesn't understand what it is. So she goes over and she touches the stone, and bang, she ends up 200 years in the past. So that's one of the themes, that it's time travel. And she ends up in Scotland, in the same place. She has no idea what has happened to her. And what's going on there is it's 1743, I believe, and it's right before the Scottish rebellion known as the 45. And she ends up seeing a man who is part of the British Army. She ends up in the middle of a skirmish between the Scottish Highlanders and the British Army. And she sees this man, and he's a dead ringer for her husband, Frank, from the past. And it is Jack Randall. Well, he tries to interfere with her, as they like to say in the book. And she's rescued by the Highlanders, but she really feels like she's kidnapped. And she is whisked off to a castle after saving the life of the next very important character, Jamie Fraser, who of course becomes the iconic romantic, I don't know what to say, hero.
Amazing
Okay.
figure.
What?
Amazing figure.
Oh, yes. Oh,
He's
yes.
just
He's
so great.
tall and redheaded and handsome and in his kilt and so on and so forth. But at any rate, she ends up in this castle, and they don't know what to make of her because she really doesn't fit in. First of all, she's walking around in a dress from the 1940s, and they think she's in her underwear, and I don't understand why she's in her underwear. But anyway, she becomes part of the castle, and she ends up healing a lot of people. With her medical knowledge, she's able to actually be useful. So she becomes a hero to some, but to others, she becomes the conjure woman, the witch, the healer. She does things that are completely taboo in that time, and she is almost burned as a witch. Jamie rescues her. She has to admit to him that she really comes from another time. And his quote is, "It would have been easier if you had been a witch than coming from another time." He was having a hard time dealing with it. Well, anyway, they get involved in the war. This brings us to what happens is he is captured by Jack Randall because he is really a traitor, and he is he's been being sought by the British Army, and he's captured and tortured, but she manages to rescue him. And that's the end of the first book. The second book is A Dragonfly in Amber. They go to France to raise money for the rising, for the Scottish Rebellion. And in that book, you meet a very interesting character by the name of Fergus. That's not his real name. He's a little French pickpocket prostitute, male child prostitute, and his name is really Claudel. He has no last name because he doesn't know who his father is. So Jamie rescues him and adopts him and names him Fergus. So this little French kid is Fergus Fraser. They aren't too successful in the French court, but the book is very interesting about what's going on in the French court, because what you have to understand about Diana Gabaldon, who is the authoress of these books, is that she does amazing research. Okay, so the rising happens, and the last battle where the Scottish lose and are just wiped out is called the Battle of Culloden. Right before the Battle of Culloden, Jamie tells Claire that he knows she's pregnant and she must go back to her own time because it's not going to be safe in Scotland. And she knows it too, because she has read her history and she knows the horrible things that will happen to the people in Scotland. So she goes back to her own time. So you can imagine she ends up in her own time in her Scottish regalia and speaking of very strange things, and they think she's nuts. Her husband in the modern times never gave up looking for her. So finally, she ends up back in the same place where she left from, and he takes her in and he says, I'm going to take care of you. I don't care if you're pregnant. I'll take care of the child. And they end up going to Boston. He gets a job. He's a historian. He gets a job as a teacher in Harvard. They go to Boston and they live there for 20 years, and they raise the daughter, of course, and this is the daughter of Jamie and Claire. And she goes back to Scotland. I don't even remember why, but she goes back, I think, for the funeral of the vicar who they stayed with. And they meet the adopted son of the vicar, and he's a historian, a Scottish historian. And through research, they find Jamie. She thinks that he died at Culloden, but he did not die at Culloden. Due to a promise that was made to him, which I won't even go into, he manages to escape being killed at Culloden lives at his ancestral home called Lallybroch for 7 years. And then because of the horrors done to the Scottish people by the British Army, he gives himself up so that they can get money. There's a bounty on his head, and he goes to prison for a while. But he gets out of prison and he takes up a life in Edinburgh. So she goes back, she finds him in Edinburgh, and she finds out that he is a seditionist because he's a printer. He's printing pamphlets, seditious pamphlets, and he's also a smuggler. So the upshot of that whole thing is that he cannot stay in Scotland because he's going to be arrested and hung. So they escape, and the next book is called Voyager. And in Voyager, they end up going to the New World. And it's a really exciting venture that they have trying to get to the New World. They get to the New World, and the next book is called The Drums of Autumn. And in the New World, he acquires some land, and he establishes in the South Carolina mountains. North Carolina? Was it North Carolina? Fraser's Ridge. And what he does is he attracts the Scottish people who are coming over as immigrants. And a lot of them are people he knew from his prison days. And so he establishes this colony. What's happening in America, of course, is the beginning of the Revolutionary War. And this, to me, was the most interesting part of the book, because you really get a feeling for what the colonists who were, in the cities and in the country went through. The rivalry between the Tories, the British, and the revolutionaries. She really depicts that so well. And the next book is The Fiery Cross. In The Fiery Cross, there is a call to arms. Jamie is very torn because he doesn't want to get involved in a war again. I'm taking too much time here. So at any rate, what happens is they end up in the Revolutionary War. There's a lot of almost getting killed, almost getting killed, almost getting killed. And finally, they establish a home on Fraser's Ridge. Claire thinks that finally they're safe by the time you get to the end of the books, and they are not. Along the way, some of the characters that you'll find in the book are, when Jamie is in prison, he meets, he becomes friendly with the warden of the prison, who is Lord John Grey. And Lord John Grey, moves to Virginia sometime during the books, and they become great friends. And of course, the daughter Brianna follows her mother. She's following her mother because her boyfriend, her now boyfriend, Roger, who is the son of the vicar, finds out that he finds an old newspaper article that Jamie and his wife and his children are going to be burned up in a fire. And so she has to go to tell her mother. So she time travels, and they all get together. And I'm not going to tell you anymore.
Yeah. They also travel back in time because Jemmy, Brianna's son, is kidnapped and right, I think.
Well, what happens is Brianna and Roger and Jemmy and their new child,
Mandy,
have to go. They go back to the present because Mandy has a patent ductus arteriosus, which is a very fixable in modern time heart defect, birth defect. And the only way she'll live is if they go back and get her fixed. So they go back and they buy Lallybroch, the ancestral estate, and they live there. But there is a group of people there. There seems to be amongst the Scottish people who are, how shall I say it, still like possessed with finding the gold that was sent to aid the Scots from France. And they also are into the Gaelic, and they want to, so they want to time travel, and they kidnap Jemmy, the son, the little boy. And so then Roger, they think that they went back in time, and Roger follows, and there's a whole thing there, but I don't really want to get into that. So there's a lot of really interesting characters. And the latest book just came out, Go Tell the Bees I'm Gone. And
it is.
yes, there it is. And I was a little disappointed in the book simply because the characters I love best are still hanging in the air. She has not resolved some of the problems, and I thought this book was going to be it. But there's going to be another one. But will I live to see it? You know, because she does tremendous research. All right. So why is the book so popular? Okay, these are the themes covered in the book. See if I leave any out. Time travel, always fun. There's a lot of books that take place at two different times, and it's so interesting. It's interesting from the author's point of view, um, because the research is interesting. I'm going to let you take this one up, Mary. What are the
Well,
other themes?
then of
Because I've
course,
been blah, blah, blah.
yeah, there's and the whole idea of the time travel is that you're always meeting people that are somehow connected to people in either the more modern time period or the 1800s. So for example, Jack Randall, who is this really awful guy. I mean,
Oh,
he
yeah.
tortures
Everybody.
Jamie, everybody, but Jamie especially in some really horrible ways.
Mhm.
And when Jamie finally sees a picture of Frank Randall, who is Claire, his wife now, her husband in the present time, he looks just like Jack. They're related to one another, and there are bunches of things that happen like that throughout the 9 books. I think one of the major, and I think probably the most attractive of the themes is the one of love and romance. Um, Jamie and Claire are an incredible couple. They're very strong. Their love is very strong for each other. There's a point at which that when Linda spoke about when Claire goes back through the stones, back to the 20th century, she doesn't see Jamie for 20 years. She thinks he's dead, and she figures she's never going to see him again. And through what Linda mentioned earlier, sort of a twist of fate in a way, she finds out that he survived and goes back to find him, which she does. And their love is still, they haven't seen each other in 20 years, and their love is still as strong as it always was. But
So
there's,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead.
I have some quotes.
Okay.
Directly from the book. These are things that Jamie says to Claire. Okay. When I die, if my last words are not "I love you," it's because I didn't have time. Okay. What I loved about the relationship was it's a mature love.
Yes.
At their wedding, this is the vow: blood of my blood, bone of my bone. I give you my body so that we may be one. I give you my soul till our lives may be done. I mean, these are very romantic things. Give me 1,000 kisses and I'll give you 1,000 more. Seems I cannot possess your soul without losing my own. You are my home now, Sassenach. He calls it Sassenach. Sassenach is a term that the Scottish use for a British person. It's sort of derogatory, but that's what he calls her anyway. And if you go online, you can find a lot of products with all of these little sayings on them and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's really quite an industry.
Benefash.
Benefash, Sassenach. That just means don't worry and stuff.
Don't worry. Yeah.
And then of course, there's the historical fiction, which
Which to me, that's what gets me into most any book. I am a historical fiction fan. And I think, I think the reason for that is that so many people are interested in what happened before now. And when you have historical fiction, you can, Diana Gabaldon, or however you pronounce her last name, as Linda mentioned, she is extremely thorough in her research. So not only are you having this wonderful story of Jamie and Claire and all the adventures that they encounter and the people and all of that, but you're finding out a lot about the Scottish Rebellion, the American Revolution, what was going on in France at the time, all of that, the fashion, everything. So reading it, I mean, her descriptions are absolutely amazing. She brings in the smells of the food. She brings in what the shelters and the houses looked like. when they're walking, what it looks like around them, everything. And so I think that's what makes it also so compelling.
Yes, and my own feeling about it is there's a lot of science in it.
Yes.
Because Claire, in the 20 years that she's in the present away from Jamie, she goes to medical school and she becomes a doctor. So when she goes back, you're getting a lot of a picture of this woman with this 20th century medical knowledge looking at what's going on with disease, and she actually makes ether because so many people are dying from things that that they couldn't fix in those times, and she's an herbalist. So I found that fascinating. There's a lot of sex and violence.
Oh, yeah.
Some people can't read these books because of the violence, but the sex and violence is really it's part of history. Most of the violence that you see is because of what happens in history, and of course the sex is what sells the book. Anyway, so
Yeah.
who is your favorite character, Mary?
You had asked me that the other day, and I was thinking about it, and I can't come down to one. I have two. Okay, Claire, obviously, because she's such a strong character, and this whole idea of her immersion in science and how she uses her knowledge without giving away anything, really. I mean, she's a healer, but she can't either do a lot of the things that she normally would do in the 20th century, because she'd be probably burned as a witch if she did. But she's very ingenious. She uses a lot of things that you wouldn't expect, and she's very, very smart. And of course, she's very loving. But I think my absolutely favorite character is Brianna.
Oh, yeah.
I love Brianna because
Brianna's the daughter.
Yeah, this is the daughter. Yes, is the daughter of Claire and Jamie, who Frank, Claire's husband in the 20th century, raises basically.
Right.
And she marries Roger, who is the son of the vicar that they were, and that Jamie, not Jamie, but Frank and Claire knew very well. And I love Brianna because she is a very independent, very self-sufficient woman. She's not afraid to ride on a horse with her skirts up around her, her thighs, which was not done in those days. She's not afraid to go up against strong men. She's just as strong as they are. She's pictured as a tall, sort of strong looking woman, beautiful, but tall and strong looking. She's a great mother. She's right now I'm in the middle of Go Tell the Bees That I Am Gone. I haven't finished it yet. And she's in Savannah right now, and she's doing portraits. She was commissioned to do a portrait, but there's a wonderful scene where she's in the middle of a battle, and everything that's going on there, because the Americans had laid siege to Savannah, and the British were, they were trying to, the Americans were eventually going to lose the siege. But she's doing this portrait, and then she's asked to do a drawing, not even a portrait, but a drawing of a dead man. And she does that, and she not only does that, but she's sitting there and she's doing all of this, and all these people are coming. He's a general. It's General Pulaski, who you might know from the Pulaski Skyway. And she continues to sketch. She sketches all the men that come in and all of that. She's not afraid of anything. And I just think she's great.
Yeah, she's one of my favorite characters too. But before, I don't know really how much time we have, because my wonderful cell phone just conked out. So I'd like to talk about the series that Starz has picked up the series, and we're into season 6 by now. And what I like about it, I think that for a TV production to pick up a historical work such as Outlander is quite a prodigious undertaking. And I have to say that they've done the history so well. They've really done the research into costumes, music, food, and it's wonderful to watch. Of course, the story rolls along, and you just, from episode to episode, hold your breath, because it is so exciting. And one of the things that they do is they weave the present and the past, and even the episodes that have to do with the past they use modern music.
Yes, they do.
And which is so effective. There is a scene in one of the last episodes where Claire is kidnapped and she is badly abused by her kidnappers. And they show how she goes in her mind to another place. And that other place is the present, where all of the characters in the book are in the present. And the music they're using is Never My Love from, what's the name of the group? I forget it. But at any rate, it's Never My Love. And it's just so well done that because I know the story, I'm kind of torn between watching what they do with the story and how well they do it. So I think that the elements that make this so popular are the ones that we mentioned, the themes of the book, and the characters are so well drawn. I mean, you really, no matter who they are, even Fergus, of course, by the time we get to the last book is an adult. And the mystery surrounding Fergus is
we don't even know that yet.
Father, who was his mother? And
we don't even know that yet. And another character that's introduced in the last book that you never even hear of before this is John Cinnamon, who is also going on a similar journey to find his father.
Right.
So it's really so interesting how, and I think that's what brings you back to the book all the time. I mean, people look at a book this size, I mean, you can see how big that book is. And people are, when I taught English, I always used to say, I had a whole thing, getting rid of the skinny book syndrome, because kids always, when you have summer reading, they always choose the skinniest book, and they'll choose something like, 100 Years of Solitude and say, oh my God, this was awful. Because it's not something they need to be reading, or The Old Man in the Sea, and they could pick up a book like this and probably read it in almost the same amount of time. And I think what happens here, she just weaves everything so well together. All of these the different plot twists, the different themes, the characters. She introduces ones. I'm going back to one of my other favorite characters, Murtaugh, who hasn't even appeared in any of the books in quite some time, but he was this wonderful character that you just can't forget.
They picked him up, and instead of killing him off the way they did in the book.
In the book,
they picked him up again in the series, and because he is such a great character. There are some changes between them, but I could see why they did what they did, and I strongly recommend that you get into the books. We like to recommend books and talk about them and why they're popular. It has all the elements. And the interesting story about Diana Gabaldon, the author, is that she has 3 biology degrees, I believe. She wrote a primer for a piece of software that she designed for people to analyze biological data. So she had a publisher, and she had a relationship with the publisher where they were friendly. And she said, I always wanted to write a novel. I have this practice novel. I don't want to show it to you. He said, let me see it. And he reads it and he says, this is dynamite. We're going to publish it. That was the Outlander book. And that's what got her started on this.
And most people don't realize that these books, I started reading these books in the early 90s. I was a chair of English, and we had a Scholastic book fair thing. And, in one of the lull times, I saw these 2 books. It was Outlander and Voyager, and I was hooked. I mean, I saw them. Oh, nice thick historical fiction books. Yay. And I mean, I have read every single one of the books. There's also an Outlander companion that, gives you the genealogy of all of it. There are all kinds of Outlander stuff.
Yes, it's an industry. Okay, so have fun with this book.
Enjoy it.
So